Good morning, everybody. My name is Noah Newman, Technology Editor with Strip-Till Farmer. Welcome to this digital product demonstration with Phospholutions, where we're going to learn more about RhizoSorb technology and how to improve your ROI with the next generation of phosphorus fertilizer. Craig Dick from Phospholutions is our presenter today. He's going to show us how phosphorus innovations like RhizoSorb are helping strip tillers boost efficiency, reduce losses, and improve ROI. Hey, Craig, I'll pass the ball over to you and you can get us started here.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. So, Craig Dick with VP of Sales and Marketing with Phospholutions. A little bit on my background. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and this year that farm turned 150 years of continuous family ownership. So we've been excited about that. And even though I don't directly farm, I still do our agronomy program for that farm. I started my career as an agronomist for a co-op in Nebraska, transitioned to a fertilizer company for around 10 years, and joined Phospholutions about 3 years ago to help them bring this product to the marketplace. And so we'll talk today about why phosphorus needs an improvement in phosphorus fertilizer. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the inefficiencies of current phosphorus and how RhizoSorb can help you guys be more efficient with your phosphorus fertilizer program at a lower cost. So excited to be here, and please ask your questions in the chat, and we'll leave some time at the end to discuss those. So We'll start here just a little bit of kind of where we've been with the history of phosphorus fertilizers. I'm not going to go all the way back to the 1800s and explain each one of these different products. But what's interesting is when you look at traditional MAP and DAP fertilizer, which is the primary phosphorus fertilizer most of us are using out in the field today, that technology was developed in the 50s. Post-World War II, really hasn't changed since it was developed. And so if you think about the things you do on your farm, from technology, tractors, herbicides, genetics, there really isn't anything on your farm you're doing like you did since the 1950s. Every year, growers are always looking for the things that are going to make them more efficient. And it's really a shame that phosphorus fertilizer hasn't changed in all that time until now. So again, we'll get into how RhizoSorb can improve that efficiency, but I want to touch on one other point, and kind of the whole global landscape of phosphorus sources for phosphate fertilizer. Pretty much all phosphorus fertilizer needs to come from a mineral source. Now, we do have some manures and things like that, but we just don't produce enough manure to cover every acre. Also, manure has its own inefficiencies in products. But if you look at the global landscape, really only 2 to 3% of global supply comes from the US. And we've got maybe about 50 years of mineral resources at current use rates. So that means right now we are pretty reliant on global imports of phosphorus. And with the current countervailing duties and tariffs, imports have been restricted for the last 3 to 6 months. And that what we're seeing is really high phosphorus prices because of that. And so as you look at the price of phosphorus per unit of bushel of corn, it's at either the worst or the second worst ever in history. And we've seen growers and retailers really pulling back from making purchases for phosphate on their farms. And so that's really a big challenge right now, because it looks to be like we've got a tremendous crop out there. It's pulling a lot of nutrients off. And so as you think about your budgets, how are you going to manage that going forward next year? And again, we think we have some solutions to that. So more to come on that. But lastly, on kind of this phosphorus sources and pricing issue, everybody's waiting for a reset. The fundamentals just don't look like that's going to happen before the end of the year, and potentially into next planting season as well before we see some type of reset. Something's got to change on this imports, or pricing is just going to remain high. As we think about phosphorus fertilizer and why it's so inefficient, let's address some of those points. So MAP and DAP is a highly soluble fertilizer. Phosphorus is highly reactive in the soil. So when you apply your MAP or DAP fertilizer to the farm, a majority of it becomes fixed in the soil in cations with iron, aluminum, and magnesium, which means very little in the year one you apply your phosphorus is available to the plant. Somewhere between 10 to 30%, depending on your soil type, is going to be available for plant uptake. That means we're reliant on traditional soil cycling, soil mineralization to make that phosphorus available over time. And unfortunately, in most cases, that's a really slow process. Maybe 1 to 2% of that phosphorus that's locked up in your soil becomes available to the plant over time. And the issue with that is, especially this time of year where we have a really big crop, it's developing really fast. Many soils don't cycle phosphorus fast enough to release it to the plant when it's needed. And so you can get firing as phosphate is translocated from the plant, which can cause disease issues and other problems, and really can just impact yields. So how can we make phosphorus more available to the plant season long to maximize our yield? And then, lastly, again, you're waiting on your roots to explore, that soil volume to access phosphorus. Phosphorus is only taken up in soil solution. And so when you only have 1 to 3% of your total soil volume explored by your roots, again, we see impacted phosphorus uptake. So before I get into how RhizoSorb can improve the efficiency of phosphate fertilizer, I want to touch just a little bit on some phosphate soil dynamics so everybody has a background and can understand how we can improve the natural process of phosphate cycling in the soil. And so when we think about phosphate, we think about it being held in 3 distinct pools. One, and this is where the majority of your phosphate in your soil is, it's locked up in a fixed pool or a non-labile pool. And so here we're waiting on soil dynamics to cycle and release phosphorus. And again, unfortunately, that's a very slow process. The active pool is the next pool, and that's like the reserve that feeds the soluble pool. The soluble pool tends to be 2 to 3% of your total soil phosphate, and that's the only way the plant takes up phosphate. And so as the plant is taking up phosphorus out of the soluble pool, you're hoping that your active pool of phosphorus can provide that crop enough phosphate during the season to maximize yield. And again, typically late season when most of your phosphate is used, that can be a slow process. So how does phosphate actually move from the active pool to the soluble pool and become plant available? There's 3 ways phosphorus can get to the plant. One is root interception. It's just being in contact with the roots. Unfortunately, that's a very small percentage of how phosphate is taken up in the plant. The second is mass flow, and that is phosphate moving with water through movement. And then the third way, this is how 95% of phosphate moves through the soil and gets to the plant, is through diffusion. And that is movements of phosphate from concentrations of high soil properties to concentrations of low gradients. So what does that mean? So again, you have your soluble pool, and as the plant is growing, it's pulling phosphate out of the soil soluble pool, creating a low concentration gradient of phosphorus. And phosphate will diffuse from the active pool into that soluble pool. So another kind of example of how that works, just graphically, and why this is so important is, again, as the plant is uptaking phosphate, that phosphorus should move from the active pool to the soluble pool. Again, this is very important to understanding how we can make phosphorus more available to the plant. So I mentioned how important late season phosphorus uptake is. And, as a ex-CCA agronomist, we're taught how important early season phosphorus is in setting up that plant for high yield. And while that's true, that's a very small percentage of the total phosphate needed in that plant's life cycle and development. In fact, over 50% of the phosphorus your plant needs to be taken up at reproduction and comes at grain fill. And that's something I don't think we talk about enough as agronomists and growers. This phosphate curve is very similar to nitrogen and sulfur. It needs so many units every day of that plant's life to maximize yield. And our current conventional fertilization sources and practices, they're just not optimized for that. We put the majority of our phosphate on either in the fall or spring pre-plant. And in like 30 days, most of that phosphate is going to be tied up. And now you're hoping that you have good soil health that's cycling enough phosphate to release to that plant. And in high yield environments, we typically just don't see that. So the problem we are really trying to solve with RhizoSorb is this problem of phosphorus being highly reactive and highly soluble, and when applied to soil, the majority of it being bound up in the soil. And so for many farmers, 10 to 30% of that phosphorus you apply is going to be available to the plant. The majority is going to be not available to the plant. So our solution that we call RhizoSorb is a metal oxide that we incorporate into the phosphorus production process when they're making the MAP or DAP granules. We adsorb and hold that phosphate so that when we apply it to the field, it doesn't instantly solubilize and get bound up in the soil. And because we're keeping the phosphorus in a plant available form throughout the growth cycle of the crop, it allows us to be twice as efficient at feeding the crop with RhizoSorb as it is compared to MAP or DAP. And again, this is due because we're simply having less of that phosphate get bound up in the soil. So this is a pretty unique approach to managing phosphorus. And we'll talk more about how this differs from other approaches on the market. Before we do that, I want to kind of just take a step back and let you guys know, how did this product come to the marketplace? Where has it been? And why are you just seeing it now? So RhizoSorb was developed at Penn State in the horticulture department by a world-renowned researcher, Dr. Lynch. Dr. Lynch developed this technology to study phosphate movement in the soil and control that movement of phosphorus so he can study how roots grow. In 2016, our founder and CEO, Hunter Swisher, was a student studying under Dr. Lynch when he discovered this technology and learned about the global supply issues, pending global supply issues, I should say, with phosphate back in 2016. And our Hunter went down to the IP license at the university and licensed Dr. Lynch's technology, and has really spent close to 10 years here now developing this technology. And it started with small plot replicated trials, many hundreds of those trials to prove out the technology on different crops and at different rates. And once we have done that work to understand how the technology can work, we moved that into large-scale field trials in 2021. And then in 2023, we brought the product to market. So we're going into our third year of product sales now, and have had lots of good feedback from the marketplace on RhizoSorb. So just to dive in a little bit deeper into the mode of action and what it is and what we're doing here, to be clear, RhizoSorb is meant to be a replacement for MAP or DAP. It's a standalone fertilizer. We produce it with global phosphate producers worldwide, import it to the US, bring it upriver, put it in warehouses, and get it to your local retailer so that all you have to do is simply make the switch from MAP or DAP. And we'll talk more about that here in a bit. Again, that our technology is incorporated at production. There's nothing you have to do on your end. Again, this active ingredient, it's a metal oxide that adsorbs the phosphate in production and holds it like a sponge until the plant is ready to use it. And again, this is a soil chemistry approach. It's not a biological. There's no microbe. And because we are doing this as a soil chemistry approach, we have a very consistent response. And I'll show that in some of our data, field trial data here coming up. We're simply keeping that phosphate from being bound up in the non-labile pool. We're keeping it available in the active pool until the plant needs it, based off the chemical concentration gradient of the phosphate pulling or the plant pulling phosphate out of the soil solution, RhizoSorb will then release phosphate on a one-to-one basis into the soil solution pool, ensuring season-long uptake of phosphorus with less applied phosphate. And I'll talk more about what that means here in a little bit. Again, I mentioned we make this product at large-scale MAP and DAP facilities. So there's really not a lot of difference between RhizoSorb and your traditional MAP and DAP granules. So very little you have to do on your end. In terms of strip tillers and how they might use RhizoSorb in their seed row bands, one of the big advantages for RhizoSorb is it has a 38% lower salt index. And that is on a pound per pound basis. So the fact that we will use 50% less P2O5 to get the same yield means that there's a dramatic reduced salt index load put out on that field in that crop when you're applying your MAP. So I mentioned RhizoSorb is a direct replacement for MAP. You really don't have to change anything else to your program. It's going to work across all soil types. You don't have to add additional equipment or additional steps. In our on-farm trial, we've done it across a variety of systems, application systems, whether you're a broadcast no-tiller or you're strip tilling or seed row placing. RhizoSorb will work into your program. It will meet or exceed your current program for MAP in terms of yield, and it'll do it at a lower cost. And we'll dive more into that here as we move on. So I mentioned we use RhizoSorb at a 50% reduction in P2O5 compared to traditional MAP or DAP. That's a pretty bold claim, and we wouldn't make it if it wasn't backed up by hundreds and hundreds of small plot replicated trials, land-grant university trials, as well as on-farm trials. And so you can see over the last 9 years, many hundreds of cumulative site years of trials, hundreds of actual trials, thousands of replications on the small plot. We have definitively proved through those small plot replications that RhizoSorb makes phosphorus more available to a plant and can meet grower yield requirements with a lower applied rate. And for today's discussion, I'm going to walk through the last 4 years of our on-farm trials. These on-farm trials were conducted over the last 4 years with a minimum of 20 acre side-by-side plots, so large-scale plots out in the field, real world, across the Midwest. And we will focus on corn for this discussion today. But if you have interest in other crops, please reach out to us and connect with us, and we can certainly provide you information on other crops as well. So this map shows where these on-farm trials have been conducted over the last 4 years. A number of these trials have been done 2 and 3 years replications. And so over the last 4 years, we have a very consistent win rate of 83% and a very consistent positive yield increase of around 1.6% compared to the grower standard practice. And so what you're seeing here with the corn on-farm chart on the right is the yield response of using RhizoSorb 839.0. The only thing we changed on-farm for this trial was we applied 50% less P2O5 than the grower standard practice, and we applied that as RhizoSorb 839.0. What was the grower standard practice? It was whatever that grower and his agronomist determined was the proper rate of phosphorus for that farmer's goals. And so in the plot, the only thing we changed was we took the MAP and DAP out, we put RhizoSorb in, we applied it at 50% less P2O5. And again, very consistent yield increase with less applied phosphate. So on these farms, on all these trials, across all those farms, there was 184 unique soil textures, meaning sand, silt, and clay. How does it perform on my farm and my location? And with any large data set, you'll have outliers, you'll have groupings, very, very common when you look at data. But what our research scientists are most interested in is what is the statistical mean of all these data sets? And what they have shown here with this red line is the data shows that it doesn't really matter whether you're on sand, silt, or clay. RhizoSorb is going to perform the same or slightly better than the standard practice, no matter your soil type. And so that's very important to understand as you think about trials in Nebraska versus Iowa, and maybe you farm in Ohio. And yes, your soil is different. We have trials in Ohio, we have trials in Iowa, we have trials in Nebraska. When you group everything together, you get a very consistent performance across all soil types. The next question we get a lot is, what about my phosphorus soil levels? And so when we look at these on-farm trial datas and we look at the soil phosphorus test level, and we plot the grower standard practice or the RhizoSorb yield compared to the grower standard practice, what we see is a very consistent yield increase at the low p-values and a narrowing of the yield advantage as you go to high soil phosphorus test levels. That really makes sense, right? Just because you make phosphorus more efficient at getting in the plant, if you're not in a phosphorus deficient soil to begin with, you shouldn't see a yield increase. And so, most universities will put their critical level around between 20 and 25, depending on your university, for your soil test level, that after that level, yield response diminishes. And we see that as well in our data. And so there's a couple ways to think about how to use phosphorus depending on your typical situation. If you own your land, you've worked hard over the last 20 years to build those P levels up in that sufficient range of 30 to, or maybe even high of 40, and you want to maintain those levels, RhizoSorb can help you maintain those P levels at a lower cost per acre. If you're on a farm you're renting or you just bought, or because you're a dryland farmer and you don't have consistent rains and you can't afford to build your p-value, and you're in that low test range in that 10 level, with a RhizoSorb, you can apply less dollars of phosphate per acre and get a better return on a per acre basis. So, we could see upwards of 3 or 4% yield increase at those low test soil values with the reduced rate of RhizoSorb. So it really helps us think about, how do we manage phosphate differently? Traditionally, with phosphate management, we've done a build and hold, meaning let's build our p-values up to that critical level of 25. And for some growers, they go past that 30, 35, because on those farms, they find they get a better yield result. The universities have trained us to do the build and hold example because as we build the p-value of the soil, we have more phosphorus available for cycling and plant availability. But we also have more phosphorus availability to environmental loss, meaning leaching or runoff. So as we think about how can we manage our p-value more efficiently in the soil, what this data set shows us is that we can maximize yields at a lower phosphorus test value than we've traditionally have done in the past. From a farmer perspective, as I think about our family's farm and all the things that we need to invest in to make that farm successful, phosphate's a pretty big ticket item, and it's just gotten bigger here the last couple of years. And so if I can maximize my yield at a 20 or 25 ppm versus a 30 or 35 ppm, the cost to raise your soil test value by 10 points at last year's prices was around $500 an acre. It's probably closer to $700 this year. So, and to do that, you need to spend that phosphate dollar value over a 5-year period. So it really makes me step back and look and say, what else can I invest in on my farm that would make me more successful than building the phosphorus soil test level? And so more to come on that from our team and research on that. But it really does, when you think about just the ROI savings of not building the P2O value and not losing that to environmental loss, I think there's some really big savings long-term for each farm on managing phosphorus more effectively. When we look at the phosphorus RhizoSorb performance across pH ranges. Again, this is our corn on-farm data set. What we see is RhizoSorb performs at all pHs better than the grower standard practice. It tends to outshine in high p-value soils, but again, across that total range of 5 to close to 8.5, we are improving phosphorus uptake with RhizoSorb and putting more bushels in your bin. When we look at the tissue data set from our on-farm corn trials last year, and so this was a set of 27 trials across the Midwest last year, weekly tissue tests across all those trials, what we see is RhizoSorb not only exceeds the minimum requirement for phosphorus uptake, we are also matching or exceeding the phosphorus uptake from MAP. So as we think about managing phosphate, it's less about how much phosphorus is in your soil, how much is in your plant. We get phosphorus in the plant, we grow more yield. If we have less phosphate tied up in our soil, we're growing that yield more efficiently at a lower cost. And again, as we think about RhizoSorb, transitioning from building the soil to getting phosphorus in the plant is really the message I want you guys to take away from today. I mentioned those trials. You guys saw the map, but as we break out the yield response by state, again, everybody's climate's different, their soil's different. So we've broken out that data set by state, so you can kind of see what should your expected yield increase be by using RhizoSorb. And I'll point out Iowa, for example. Iowa is one of the states we have the most trial data in. It also has some of the best phosphate test values across the Midwest. We're seeing about a 0.7 bushel increase there. You go to South Dakota, where the P2O5 levels are typically lower. We're seeing a little higher yield there. So depending on where you're at in the country, our average is 1.6% yield increase. You could be more or less that, depending on your specific situation. One of the biggest questions we get from agronomists and growers is, I've spent all this time and effort to build up my soil test values. Now you're telling me I can use 50% less P2O5, maintain my yields. What about maintaining my soil test levels? And this is something that our research and development team has been actively pursuing for the last 4 years, going into 5th year of trials. We've had 8 location trials across the Midwest with six replications per treatment, site on site, year over year for the last 4 years, looking at specifically how does RhizoSorb affect that soil test level. And I'll go through the data, but at the end of the day, what we were seeing is RhizoSorb plots can maintain your soil test levels and your crop yields year over year, site on site. How is that possible? One, we're specifically providing enough phosphate for that crop's needs without pulling from that soil test, that soil phosphorus pool. So over the last 4 years, again, we have tested the soil at the beginning of the trial and at the end, looking at applying 50% less P2O5 compared to the grower standard practice of a full rate of MAP. And what we see consistently is statistically, there's no difference in that soil test level. And that's represented by these error bars here. We do see some, inter-year variation of the actual number, very consistent with what you would expect in a soil test. But when you do many, many replications and can do the statistics on it, that is what's provided by those error bars. And that's what you want to look at. Are we consistently staying at 20 throughout those error bars? And we see that year over year. We'll be continuing this trial, and we'll continue to monitor this situation. But at the end of the day, RhizoSorb is meeting the need for the plant phosphate demands, and we're able to meet or exceed that grower standard practice with a lower use rate. Again, because we're feeding the plant, not feeding the soil. The next question growers always ask is, what is this going to cost me? And so when we break out the cost of 1152.0, These numbers are a little bit out of date. 100 pounds might cost you closer to $45 today, but we'll use the 40 that's on the screen as for this example. To hit that 50% P2O5 reduction, you use 1/3 of the product compared to MAP as RhizoSorb. So you would apply 66 pounds instead of 100 pounds. That will come with roughly a 10% savings on a per acre basis. So right up front, $4 an acre savings. I would encourage you all to go to our website, phospholutions.com, check out our grower savings calculator. You can put in your use rate if this differs from the 100 pounds, your acres, and whether you're using MAP or DAP, and it will calculate the per acre savings you should see, and then give you a total across all your acres, how much you can save by moving from MAP to RhizoSorb. Lastly, we often tout a $20 per acre grower ROI, and that comes from the $4 savings plus that 1.6% yield increase on 200 bushels per acre at $5 per bushel. You would see around 3.2 bushel advantage with $16 additional revenue. So again, that $20, that might be more if you're a higher yielding, higher use rate farmer. It might be a little less if you're lower yielding, lower use rate. So again, encourage you to go to our website, check out the calculator, and calculate your savings on your farm. So many growers associate lower use rate of fertilizer with potential lower yields. And, throughout all of our data, we don't see that across our data, but, and we're so confident of that. For first-time growers, we offer a RhizoSorb grower guarantee. And what that allows growers to do is enroll a minimum of 200 acres to try it on your farm, corn, soybeans, and for this year, we'll be adding in wheat as well. And as long as you have crop insurance on those acres, if your yields don't meet 100% of your 10-year APH, you can receive up to $40 an acre if your yields don't match that. As of this year, we're closed for the 2025 growing season, but here in a couple months, we'll be opening that up for the 26 season. So RhizoSorb seems like it could be a fit on your farm. I encourage you to take advantage of this program. We've touched briefly on some of the phosphorus issues in terms of runoff. And I want to wrap up here today with a little discussion on sustainability. So depending on what region of the country you're in, phosphorus runoff is a pretty big issue. And we've done a lot of research on that as well. And by transitioning to RhizoSorb, we've shown that we can see 78% reduction in phosphate runoff and up to 84% reduction in phosphate leaching. And so if you're in one of these impaired watersheds, Lake Erie, Des Moines River, this is a big impact for those areas. And again, sustainability doesn't have to cost you more. In fact, with RhizoSorb, it'll cost you less and it'll perform better. So we think that's actually a very interesting perspective on addressing sustainability. The other thing that is very interesting about RhizoSorb is we've done a full life cycle analysis. And so we have shown that even producing overseas, bringing it to the US, we have a 45% carbon reduction by switching from RhizoSorb or switching from MAP to RhizoSorb. So what does that mean for you as a grower? Well, it looks like 45Z continues to make progress. And so as you think about opportunities to grow low carbon index corn or low CI corn, RhizoSorb is a very easy switch out for your program to lower your carbon footprint of growing that corn. And depending on where the premiums come out for growing this corn, that could be another $3 to $5 an acre in your pocket in terms of premiums for switching to RhizoSorb. More to come on the 45Z, but stay tuned to that. And remember, if that is something you're interested in, I would encourage you to contact us to learn more about RhizoSorb. The last sustainability advantage that I want to point out for today is RhizoSorb has been approved in the state of Pennsylvania as enhanced efficiency fertilizer. So what that means is for growers that are contracting with the USDA to have a CSP program, conservation program contract, they can add RhizoSorb to their contract, and depending on use rates and contract, that could be $10 to $70 an acre in government rebates for being in that program. So we hope that in August, we will get approval nationwide for that. So more to come on that. Again, if you're enrolled in any one of those conservation resource programs, reach out to us and we can help guide you on adding RhizoSorb to that contract. So just kind of rounding out again, RhizoSorb, what are we trying to do? We're making a phosphorus that is going to not tie up in your soil. It will be twice as efficient at feeding your crop. And so that allows us to apply less fertilizer on a per acre basis, have less cost per acre, have less runoff and leaching and environmental loss of the applied phosphorus. It's not going to impact your soil test levels. And lastly, no matter where you are, we probably have a trial that we've done very close to your backyard. And so you should have a high confidence that RhizoSorb is going to perform the same, if not better, than your current phosphate program. And again, if you have interest and want to learn more, I encourage you to reach out to us via our website, phospholutions.com, or go ahead and email us at info@phospholutions.com, and one of our regional sales managers or technical agronomists can get in touch with you to have further discussions on how RhizoSorb can help you save money this year on your phosphate bill, but not only that, drive more yield and help you drive more ROI in a pretty tough environment this year. Noah, we want to open it up to some questions?
Yeah, great presentation. Thank you very much, Craig. A lot of great information in there. Again, if you have any questions right now for Craig, you can type those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll get those answered. We had one that came in early. You pretty much answered it, but where can I find out more or determine savings? That savings calculator, that's on the website, right?
Yep. Go to phospholutions.com, and I believe there's a pretty big button in the upper right hand you can click on and go right to that calculator.
So you mentioned, you've gotten a lot of feedback from growers about RhizoSorb. What are some of the common things you're hearing from farmers when they use RhizoSorb? So
I've been very surprised by the amount of growers that know how inefficient phosphate fertilizer is. They get that. They're looking for solutions out there, and for many growers, adding an additional step in terms of a coating or maybe a biological, they just don't have time to do that, especially for a strip tiller. Every day that crop is not in the ground is costing him money. And so he's already taken time to stop and, fill that strip till machine a couple times a day. And what we've heard from growers that are strip tilling is, look, the cost savings is great, but the operational efficiencies of applying less product and planting more in a day with less fills means I get my corn in the ground faster, and I'm going to reach higher yield potential. And the potential yield increase of being in the ground a day or two earlier more than outweighs the cost savings. The other thing that strip tillers have told us is, phosphorus is really important to my program. And unfortunately, with limitations of my equipment, the majority of my blends ends up being phosphorus. And so the fact that I can reduce my phosphate volume in that blend by 33% and put in more sulfur or more potash or add micronutrients, there's probably something else out there that will drive more yield for you than phosphorus. But we also don't want to skip on phosphorus. It's super important. So if we can feed phosphorus more efficiently at a lower use rate and add in more nutrients and have a more complete fertilizer blend going in that seed row, I think we've got the opportunity to unlock quite a bit more yield doing that than continue to pump phosphorus on the farm.
Yeah, that pretty much answered what my next question was going to be, is about why this would be great for a strip till system. It seems like a really good fit for a strip till system. You said, though, it could work in any kind of system, no till, but strip till, it's been a really good fit, it sounds like.
It's been a great fit. We've got some grower testimonials on our website. So again, if you go to our website and go to our YouTube page, you can watch some of those. But a high yielding strip tiller in Nebraska, he's on his third year. He's been very happy with not only improved yields by using RhizoSorb, but he's actually seeing his P levels come up on his farm because he's being more efficient in what he's applying. And he's having less just locked up in the soil that doesn't show up on the soil test.
Now, as far as application timing goes, is there a recommended time to apply? Are we talking, spring, fall, in season, or all the above?
All the above. RhizoSorb, again, it's meant to simply replace your MAP or DAP in your program. So we assume that you and your local agronomy team, local university, have determined the best way to manage phosphate on your farm. And so simply switching out what you're currently doing in terms of MAP to RhizoSorb is all you have to do. Again, we've got fall, spring applied trials. We've got strip till trials. We've got broadcast trials. And when you look at the data, there's really no statistical difference. Whether you're using MAP or DAP, whether you're strip tiller or broadcast, it will improve your program simply by switching out to RhizoSorb.
Yeah, and you mentioned how you saw a good yield response in multiple states. Where are most of your customers from? Is this something that could work in any kind of region, or?
Yeah, so great question. So my role is I manage North America, US and Canada. We've got trials in Canada as well, and have seen positive response in that $20 to $50 ROI depending on crop. But we also have an international team. And so we've got trials going on in Latin America, South America. We've done trials in Europe, Africa, and India. And again, we see improved phosphorus uptake at a lower cost throughout all those trials very consistently.
The stories we do on strip tillers, we talk a lot about nitrogen and in-season nitrogen applications, how important is phosphorus? And do you think that's often overlooked, maybe, and as people try to accomplish higher yield goals?
I don't think phosphorus is overlooked. And phosphorus is vitally important. It's really, after nitrogen, our number 2 needed nutrient. The challenge is phosphorus is one of the most reactive ions. And so when you put your phosphate fertilizer, MAP or DAP out, it's highly soluble. Within 30 days, it's going to be in solution. And once it's in solution, you have this huge concentration gradient of available phosphorus, and the soil comes along and just gobbles it up and binds it up, because that phosphorus does not like to be in ionic form. If you have phosphorus and oxygen, it spontaneously combusts. It's that reactive. It's got to bind up with something to maintain itself. And so from Dr. Lynch on through our research and development team has done is we have found a way to grab and hold on to those phosphorus ions in a way that keeps it less reactive, but doesn't bind it up so tight that the plant can't get to it. And so what we're, again, simply doing is ensuring that plant can feed phosphorus more efficiently season long without over applying it to our farm and creating a leaky system that causes environmental loss. And again, not the farmers have done anything wrong in the last 50 years. They've just been simply doing what they've been instructed to by universities and agronomists. And it's been the best way to manage phosphorus up until 3 years ago. But now there is a better technology for managing phosphate on your farm.
Yeah, definitely exciting to hear about. I mean, that's a lot of people are looking to increase efficiency and save money these days, get the most bang for their buck. So definitely checks those boxes. I think that's all the questions we have right now. Any other anything else you wanted to add, Craig, before we wrap? Oh, actually, it looks like we have one coming here now. Do you have research on surface banding post-emerge of product over the top of the row on corn or soybeans? Could have application in no-till. He's a strip tiller, it sounds like. And he says Fred Belo at the University of Illinois and his associates have some interesting results on corn. So,
yeah, I'm not very familiar with Fred. He does great work. Not specifically on this particular application method, and I'm not aware of us having trials specifically with that application method. I can go back and look, but yeah, I would highlight that in pretty much all of our trials, we see improved performance over traditional MAP and DAP. So, but would be something, I'll reach out to Fred and learn more and see if there's something we can't set up to learn more about that application method.
All right. Thank you for that question. And I think that's all we have. So anything else you'd like to add, Craig, before we wrap things up here?
Again, if you have interest, please reach out via our website. We have a regional sales team. Additionally, we have a couple of distribution partnerships we've announced here over the last couple months. If you're in the Eastern Corn Belt, the Andersons is a great partner of ours and they have product in hand, ready to go for this fall season for retailers in that region of the country. If you're working up in Canada, we have a distribution partner up there as well. Nexus BioAg is bringing the product out into the countryside. So, and we have multiple warehouses throughout the Midwest and many retailers that have been working with us here for a couple of years to bring this to the market. So, would encourage you to ask your retailer about it as well, because in many cases they probably have some on hand ready to go for you to try it on your farm. And if you do try it and you do see the advantages that we've shown here today, please reach out and let us know. We'd love to hear how it's working for you.
All right. Well, hey, I look forward to seeing all you guys at the Farm Progress Show, which is going to be here before we know it. I know you guys will be there, so looking forward to stopping by your booth. And,
we'll be at Farm Progress, but next week we're going to be at your event.
That's right. Yep.
So pretty excited about that one right now, actually.
Yeah, Strip Till Conference, July 31st, August 1st in Iowa City. Can't wait to see all you guys there. All right, well, that'll wrap things up. This has been a great presentation. Again, this was recorded, so you will be getting a recording of this in your email inbox within 48 hours, and then we'll also have the entire session posted on our YouTube page as well as striptillfarmer.com. So feel free to share it with any of your coworkers, colleagues, friends. A lot of great information in there. And on behalf of Strip Till Farmer, Craig Dick, and all the team at Phospholutions, thank you so much for tuning into today's digital product demonstration on RhizoSorb technology. And hey, hope you have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Noah.
Thanks, Craig.